For those of you that don't know, Cyberpunk 2077 is my favorite game of all time, and a big part of that is the amazing and immersive world. But no game world like this can be so immersive without some awesome world building and lore. And that's because the story of Cyberpunk 2077 actually begins in the early 1800s, when the original dynasties and families that would eventually give rise to megacorporations hundreds of years later were born, including many notable giants like Arasaka. But 1989 was the actual year things really kicked into gear. Secretly, behind the backs of the United States government, the FBI, NSA, DEA, and CIA all banded together to form what they called the Gang of Four, and with their power and influence, started to run the US behind the backs of the president and legislative and executive branches. Now pulling the strings, the Gang of Four attacked South America in an all-out war due to their own interests, and because of all of the casualties and injuries, massive amounts of spending were put into cybernetics and drugs to help the veterans. Sadly though, this war along with many other conflicts around the world led to an all-out collapse of society. Colombian drug lords, pissed at the never-ending death, launched a small nuclear bomb at New York and killed thousands, which in conjunction with engagements across the world set the stock market into a complete freefall in 1994, wiping away a majority of humanity's wealth. In this now chaotic world in pure disarray, the biggest companies around the globe started to band together to help, which resulted in them only becoming more powerful and influential, the beginning of the mega corporations' rise to power. Natural disasters all over the world started to erupt around this time as well, with an earthquake putting a third of Los Angeles underwater and droughts in the Midwest leading to food shortages that starved millions. To top it all off too, in the early 2000s a deadly plague broke out which threatened a majority of Earth's population, and with everything going downhill fast, drastic action had to be taken. The mega corporations once again stepped up and created new technologies like the net to try and make communication easier, but this only meant more and more power for those evil corpos. And with all of this newfound power, the organizations also began to amass huge personal armies, which then cascaded into all-out corpo wars that led to even more devastation across the world. Gangs which had already formed in almost every major city became more and more powerful, and the Earth as we know it was on the verge of complete and utter annihilation. But as they always had, the corpos managed to gather even more influence by promising salvation. And essentially, this process of mega corporations becoming more powerful continued over and over through multiple wars and even space battles, and eventually resulted in the setting we've come to know from the game itself, where we play as V in Night City in California. And it's in the game we get to explore so many different awesome ideas like cyberpsychosis or cybernetic implants that cause people to go crazy, along with the evolution of the net and the black wall specifically, which serves as a protective barrier to the net to keep out rogue AI that might even be working with extraterrestrial beings that are helping them take over the universe. It's just such an insane backstory for the whole game, but along with that comes so many deep explanations and displays of how this future fantasy of humanity would live, with an over-reliance on technology and a loss of connection to our own bodies being key. Even places like brothels in this dystopian future are actually staffed by humans with chips in their head called dolls, who simply fulfill your every fantasy only for the chip in their brain to wipe their memory and for them to do it over and over again, like being trapped in a nightmare that you never even knew you experienced. It's a world with so many dark and twisted themes like this, but also at its core, one that didn't forget about all of the humanity we have beneath those layers of electronics and wires in our heads, where people still at their core have a fire and love in their soul to save the little bit of humanity we all have left. There's nothing quite as riveting as experiencing a great mystery for the first time, and in the case of Horizon Zero Dawn, that mystery is dished out in a roller coaster ride of reveals and twists that will have you on the edge of your seat the entire time, that by the end, paint the picture of a world enveloped by good lore. When you first begin the game as Aloy, you are trapped in a post-apocalyptic world where massive dinosaur-shaped machine intelligences are roaming the wasteland, killing everything on sight. And amongst these monsters are multiple human tribes that have built great cities and scattered throughout the lands. It's almost like a prehistoric and futuristic setting at the same time, and it really begs the question, what exactly happened here? And that question is what sits at the core of this unforgettable narrative, and only only by the end do we really figure it out. Back in 2013, a man named Ted Faro was born. Even as a child, he was ambitious and a genius, and by the time he was a young adult, he was on his way to founding a massive robotics company that would change the world. Eventually getting into cahoots with powerful and rich benefactors and governments for wartime efforts, Ted aimed to design an all-powerful war artificial intelligence that was able to self-replicate and was unhackable. Most horrifying of all, though, the fuel source to power these robots and their hive mind required organic material, and one of the best sources of that on Earth was humans. As if no one could have possibly predicted it, these robots went rogue and quickly started attacking humanity. And because of how advanced they were in their ability to quickly replicate and grow, the human race as we know it stood no chance. So as a last-ditch effort, Project Zero Dawn was proposed, a measure that realized that while current-day humans were utterly doomed, maybe some future civilization would still have hope. Designed to come alive hundreds of years later, after the robot overlords had ruined the entire planet and stripped it of all organic material, an artificial intelligence named Gaia was to awake once the robots died and begin the seeding of the Earth all over again from square one. Along with Gaia, she was also given a handful of subroutines that would be in charge of different functions for repopulating the Earth with humans again. But most concerning of all was a subroutine named Hades, whose only job was to, in the event that the Zero Dawn project did not work, completely reset Gaia and have her start over again with no pre-planning, having to come up with new ideas to save humanity. When the robots that Ted had originally created eventually disappeared, Gaia awoke and began her pledge to save the world. Small robotic dinosaurs were created in her core that were sent out into the world to spread the building blocks of life, and over hundreds of years the Earth began to again flourish. Then, using cloning technology from the old ones, what the previous civilization of humanity was called, new humans were created and sent into the wilds to fend for themselves and once again rebuild civilization. For a while, it seemed as if Project Zero Dawn was actually going to work, but then disaster struck. Shortly before the game begins, due to an unknown signal from a faraway origin, the subroutines were split from Gaia, and suddenly each had a mind of their own. The one in charge of building massive terraforming machine monsters became hostile and started to create killing machines like saber-toothed tigers, and the outside world was once again full of killer robots that humanity had to fight. Only this time, humanity was still in the Stone Ages when they had to do it. And even more scary, Hades, the most evil subroutine split from Gaia, now had an unrelenting goal to destroy her and her initiative to let Earth once again start over. And really, it's just another awesome setup for a game world, and I think it's one that works so well specifically because of how well the mystery is handled when you're actually playing the first game. Slowly peeling back the layers of the strange old ones and who they were, and piecing together the great catastrophe that occurred is so fun to engage with. And I wish more games would focus on handling their lore in this way, where you feel like a detective in a show, with the stakes getting higher and higher with each reveal. Sometimes the best lore in games comes from places that you least expect, and experiences that never reach the critical acclaim they deserve. And one of the best examples of this is the Pathologic series. The original game came out in 2005 and was developed by Russian studio Icepick Lodge. It features a story about a small town in a remote part of the Eastern European steppe that has fallen prey to a strange strain of a devastating affliction known as the Sand Plague. You take on the reins of 3 playable characters, one a bachelor of medicine, another a Haruspec surgeon, and finally a cursed and creepy changeling woman. Over the course of 12 days in each of these player campaigns, you must work to slowly uncover what happened in this town and where the plague's coming from. And along the way, you stumble upon mysteries and philosophy more eye-opening than anyone could ever imagine. There was actually a sequel of sorts also made in 2019, but realistically, it's more of an HD remake of just one of the original stories with better gameplay, voice acting, and graphics. The true genius of the Pathologic series and what makes it so special in both entries, though, is the world that it all takes place in. As you traverse this strange town, you are met with a host of unusual and peculiar characters, as well as a variety of locations that they're haunting. For example, there's a massive structure on the west side of town across a river called the Polyhedron, which reaches far into the sky and is made of glass and circular architecture. Even a quick look at its design reveals that it defies the laws of gravity and physics as we know them, with the people of the town referring to it as a miracle by the hands of God or math. Inside lie strange markings and symbols, as well as secret doors that lead to the interior. The Polyhedron itself was designed by previous residents of the town and is now worshipped by many like a god. Inside, children are protected and housed, but some in the town think that something more sinister might be going on. Theories have begun to spring up that the Polyhedron itself is a device used for immortality, and that the children inside are sacrificed for their souls to power the beast. Other tales tell that the Polyhedron may even be able to make dreams come true or bend the fabric of reality itself. And on the opposite side of town lies another building, the Abattoir, which is part of a series of slaughterhouses that kills animals for food. But also, rumors have spread something much more evil is going on here as well. And really, as you walk around this spine-chilling town and get to know it more, things only become harder and harder to understand. There's more than just a horrible plague wreaking havoc on this city, and in each story you get to play across, you unearth new secrets and explanations for how this town came to be and where the seemingly supernatural phenomena are stemming from. And like many other games with great lore, another big part of the Pathologic formula is the enticing psychological questions it asks and a strict reliance on keeping the mystery alive until the very end. It really is just one of the most memorable game worlds of all time that never got a full moment of love and recognition that it truly deserves. One day, seeing a full-on sequel to this idea with new characters and stories could be so fascinating, especially when you consider how open-ended the game was, with an economy you had to manage in town and quests that you could fail based on a time limit. Without a doubt, a game series whose world and lore needs to be seen and experienced by so many more people. If you've ever watched my channel before, you know that my favorite style of games are experiences with a lot of agency, or in other words, immersive sims. But while Prey and its DLC Mooncrash is the most underrated game of all time, check out my video on it if you haven't already, there's actually one other immersive sim game that has even better lore, Deus Ex. The series takes place in a near-future Earth where technology has been set loose. Humanity is now merged with machines, with many augmented people roaming the streets, which became especially dangerous after an event known as the Aug Incident, where augmented people across the globe all in unison became enraged and violent after a broadcast turned them into monsters because of a hidden biochip in their heads. And while this event and the more recent games dive deeply into this story and its consequences, in my opinion, the actual world of Deus Ex and how it came to be, or in other words, the lore, is the most fascinating part. Because the real story of Deus Ex actually begins 300 years ago, with the formation of the now fabled group, the Illuminati. Just like in the real world, this group sought to retain control over humanity by using political and societal pressure to bend the masses to their will. And for hundreds of years, this plan worked. Hiding in the shadows, the leaders of this elusive group pulled the strings behind the presidential elections, wars, and most conflicts. However, during the turn of the 21st century, a great threat to the Illuminati and their power had developed: the internet. You see, the internet posed a great threat to the Illuminati because of its open and decentralized nature. Anyone, anywhere, could post anything. And because of that, in no time, misinformation and confusion became commonplace. The ease of access to information, regardless of whether it was true, led to people becoming conspiracy theorists en masse, and society as a whole was quickly changing. This destabilization of sorts made it hard for the Illuminati to retain control because the spread of information was so chaotic that it was now impossible for any one person or group to control it. So fearing the end of the organization as they knew it, the 5 main leaders of the Illuminati met to discuss what to do next. But because they could not come to a single agreed upon decision, one member named Bob Page took drastic action and betrayed everyone else, initiating a grand plan to once again move the Illuminati to the top of the food chain. First of all, Page, with the help of top scientists, created a pandemic called the Great Death, which was developed and released in a Chinese research facility originally, leading to countless deaths and destabilization in the world, on top of a host of other contagions that were already wreaking havoc. Next, Page moved to consolidate power in the biggest government organizations similar to the United Nations, of which he had a high stake in each. And maybe most important of all, under the guise of making the internet a more welcoming and kind place, Page finalized the Aquinas Protocol, which instituted a hyper-intelligent AI called Icarus to be in control of the internet. And this was all under the guise of removing harmful posts and misinformation while actually retaining complete control over the spread of information and thought for the Illuminati. These massive moves from Page sent the world into utter chaos, but in the process allowed the Illuminati to take full control from governments and big corporations that had led us to our doom. And it's one of the most profound setups for a game series of all time, especially when you consider that this world was actually created back in the 90s, meaning the fact that a lot of these ideas seem so plausible or have just outright happened all the more insane. More than many other game series out there, Deus Ex is a commentary on what a dystopian future would look like with our modern day technology, and how humanity would be willing to surrender its own freedoms to become slaves to all-powerful people and organizations we can't even see. And on top of this, so many of the predictions the series made ended up coming true, and are a huge warning sign for what we might expect in the near future of our real lives too. Or put differently, a game series with a set of lore that not only is extremely fascinating to learn about, but also extremely concerning when applied to our real world as well. But also, it just allows for an amazing universe to explore, with futuristic locations and technology that have become so integrated into humanity, asking us questions about whether enhancing ourselves past what it means to be human is even worth it, and whether or not we lose what we were along the way. This isn't a world full of giant monsters that crawl out of black holes or have wings and fly. It's a world full of the monsters we see every day, evil organizations and other human beings alike that want to control our everyday lives. And maybe that's more insane than any other fictitious world out there could be. Well, I guess we'll find out.